Welcome back to Rewind of the Living Dead. I'm Damon Hudson Martin.
And I am Chief Science Officer Patrick Guerra. Welcome to the Alien franchise wrap-up.
It is time. So, Patrick, this week, of course, we're not necessarily reviewing one movie. In a weird way, we're kind of reviewing 9 movies because we are wrapping up the entire Alien franchise, which started way earlier this year with Alien and going into Aliens, and then obviously more recently with Alien Romulus. And now that we've reviewed every film minus 2, we never reviewed Alien versus Predator Requiem for very good reason, because we just don't consider them canon. Although I will give credit, Fede Alvarez, who directed Romulus, said it's all canon. I'm sorry, Fede, I disagree. We are going to rank those films tonight, though. We didn't review them. We're going to rank them. But tonight, Patrick, is wrapping up our Alien franchise review. Your favorite franchise of all time? Is it ahead of Friday the 13th?
I think it's fair to say. I think I know a lot about it, and this year has been a real education thanks to Romulus coming out, because it makes me realize how much I know about this franchise, like right off the top of my head, and the lore and how everything works, and the actual expansiveness of the franchise, and just how like dedicated I am to all of that. It really, being able to talk about this franchise has made me reflect and realize that it is my top franchise. I mean, I'm wearing, you can't see it really, but I'm wearing my Ripley shirt with Jonesy. I have my Weyland-Yutani hat. This is a guy who lives it. Like, I really do. I never thought about it until now, because I've said many times on the show, Alien's my favorite film of all time. And so what about the franchise? And Damon, I feel like doing this for the good part of the entire year, we've really been just coming back to the franchise as we can during the year. I'm starting to realize that this is not just any old horror franchise, Damon. This might be one of the best horror franchises out there. What do you think? Because I don't know if this franchise means as much to you as it means to me.
So this is our 3rd franchise review. Is that correct? Am I remembering that right? We did Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Nightmare on Elm Street, now Alien.
Yeah.
What I learned in our 2 previous franchise reviews was Texas Chainsaw Massacre was a series that was really built around 2 movies and a whole lot of bad movies. We watched everything, and by the end of that, we were kind of like, boy, man, did it get rough at moments in this franchise. Nightmare on Elm Street, I think, was, because that's my favorite franchise, I think its highest highs are incredibly high, and its lowest lows, I'm looking at you, Freddy's Dead, and the remake, of course, the lowest lows are pretty low. But again, that's a franchise that's built around its strengths. And I think Alien is comparable. Because I think I mentioned this on the show before, Aliens was the one I saw first. I watched it on CBS Sunday night movies when I was a kid in like the early 90s. I had never even heard of Alien, so I had no idea there was another film. I was a kid. I had no idea there was another film. And I watched Aliens, and I freaking loved it. I was immediately enthralled. The whole thing was great. Even on CBS, where they cut out the cursing and, of course, all the, there's a lot of stuff that was edited out. And that's actually... It was the director's cut. What eventually got released as James Cameron's director's cut was the one they showed on CBS. I loved it. I adored it. And it wasn't until after I saw that I found out, there was an Alien film before that. And that was more of a straight-up horror film. And when I watched that one scared me. I was like, wow, this is pretty scary. And I've stuck around. I've stuck around for every single movie. I saw Alien 3 in the theater when I was a kid, because after seeing Aliens, I was like, I got to see Alien 3. I got to. And then I sat down, and they killed Hicks and Newt right away, and I was like, fuck this movie. No, I'm joking. But yeah, so it's weird. Like, Alien and Aliens, I've said on this show, and I stand by this statement, Patrick, I think it's the greatest 1-2 combo of science fiction horror in history. Sorry to Star Wars. I think this is better than Star Wars. I think Alien and Aliens as just a story, just those 2 films together, because they are so great yet so different, that I don't think it could be topped. Don't get me wrong. I love Star Wars. I'm a big Star Wars fan.
Me too.
To me, nothing can be topped. Alien and Aliens. And then going out from there, spiraling out from there, there have been some highs and there have been some lows. I think what really I marveled at is, and I know this is very recent, but I think what I really marveled at is the rebound because going back and looking at all the movies, more recently the movies were not that strong. I mean, Alien Resurrection we didn't love, really didn't love. Neither one of us even wanted to review the Alien versus Predator movies.
No.
Prometheus, my feelings are well documented on that film. And I did come around on Covenant, but coming into the series, I was like, I didn't really like Covenant when I saw it either. So I was like, man, this is going to be a great start and a rough finish. But then Romulus came out. And, not to go back to our Romulus review, but we both really liked that film. I think we were both like kind of going in, oh God, I hope this is good.
Yeah.
And walked out very pleasantly surprised. And then I'm sure maybe you saw the teaser drop for Alien Earth, the new Noah Hawley series. It's not really, there's nothing to it really. It's more of just like you see the plot line of what it actually is. I still don't know what exactly is going to happen. I don't know the timeline, but Noah Hawley's an incredible filmmaker, and I'm excited to see an Alien series on TV. And it's on Hulu, so it's not going to be edited. There's not going to be, for censored. It's going to be a hardcore Alien. So it's almost like the franchise has been reinvigorated in 2024 and 2025. So I think that to me is the strongest sign of where this franchise was at and where it's going, because to me, I think it's actually rebounding right now.
It's rebounding, but also like I think about its staying power. And you posited this question to me off the air. We might as well bring it up now. Is Alien the best sci-fi franchise of all time? Now, right away, there's a couple of listeners that are like, you shut the fuck up, it's Star Wars, or you shut the fuck up, it's Star Trek, or you shut the fuck up, it's some other thing, Battlestar Galactica, or Doctor Who, or whatever they want to say. But the quality control of the Alien movies, even the ones we don't like, are very high. You notice you don't just keep getting Alien movies every year. Like we're going to probably get a Halloween movie here sooner than later. Like it's probably going to happen within the next year and a half. There will be another Halloween movie. A lot of these movies get turned over quickly because people just keep coming to watch them. I mean, Scream imploded, right? Like it kind of came roaring back, had two pretty strong films. They went through some shit and it exploded, and they were like, cool, we're just starting over again. Like we're going to bring Sidney Prescott back. Like they just keep kind of churning them. The Alien films are big movies, so the studio takes their time making them, and they make sure to make them to the best of their abilities. Now, sometimes they get it wrong. I'm looking at you, Alien Resurrection. Sometimes they get it wrong, but I can't accuse that film of being low quality. I just didn't like what it was, but it was well made. They chose good directors. They had good actors, and great special effects. And they're living in this completely, forgive the pun, alien world. And they're taking us into it. And this has been going on for the better part of 40 years. And I'm like, wow, I can't really say that about even my favorite other horror franchises who have come roaring back recently. And you and I just went, oh man, that sucked. Or, oh man, that disappointed me. Or it's like, hey, take your time. Like it was almost like, I think the feelings we had about like the new Texas Chainsaw movie, the new Halloween movies. It was like, why did you rush this to get to market so fast? The new Exorcist movie. These things just felt rushed. Like let's ride the train. Let's get it. Alien Romulus came, I mean, over a decade, over 15 years after Alien AVP Requiem. You know what I mean? Like it took time. There was a studio change and all that stuff too, but the development process was important. Even this Alien Earth that's coming out, it got paused during the pandemic and during the strikes, but they weren't just like, all right, well, let's get it out. We have to like hit a date. They're like, nope, pause. We'll pause and we'll do it right and we'll get it out right. And they got Noah Hawley to do the TV show, another great artist. And so, and whatever you feel about Alien Romulus, you can't, with a straight face, tell me that was a poorly made movie. You just don't know movies if that's the case. It's not a poorly made movie. It's an incredibly well made movie that should probably get a few Oscar nods for its technical achievements. So I'm looking at this franchise, and I'm going, they're sort of batting 1,000 on the sci-fi end of things. On the horror end of things, it comes in, it ebbs and flows. Sometimes it leans more toward action. Sometimes it leans more towards horror. On the story side, sometimes it just doesn't work for me, just for whatever reason it is. But I think this franchise is consistently quality, and there's fans of even the movies we hate. They have have our numbers on YouTube never looked better than whenever the words Covenant or Prometheus are on one of our video clips. The videos go through the roof. People love this franchise. They come back to it. There's generations of there are kids who are like, what do you mean Alien? What is that? I don't know. I don't know Alien. I know Prometheus. I know Covenant. I like those movies. It's tied to those old movies. I've never heard of those movies, but I like Alien. I like Prometheus and Covenant, and I like whatever's coming next. It's a big franchise put out by a studio, and quality's put at the forefront. What do you think, Damon? Is this the best sci-fi franchise of all time?
I'm going to make the declaration that this is the greatest sci-fi franchise of all time for one big reason. And here's what it is, Patrick. When Alien Romulus came out, that led to everybody releasing a list of their favorite Alien films from 1 through 9. Some people ranked, everyone included Alien vs. Predator and Alien vs. Predator Requiem, which we were originally not going to do. And then we decided, you know what? Everyone else has put them in there. We got to at least put them in the ranking. We don't have to review them, but we at least got to put them in the ranking. But that film being released led to everybody, every website out there, every creator out there was like, ranking 1 through 9 their favorite Alien films. And I think what I found out by that happening is that everyone has different opinions. Like, I thought just because of how classic they are, everyone's favorites would be Alien and Aliens. I mean, you and I, we'll talk about our top 9. We'll rank them a little bit later in the show. But those are the two that are just the most universally beloved Alien films. And, one of them earned Sigourney Weaver an Oscar nomination. That was, massive, huge films. But then I was surprised to find out that some people's favorite film was Prometheus. Somebody had Alien Resurrection ranked number 2, and I was like, what?
Yes. Yeah.
And by the way, I'm not saying they're wrong. It's an opinion. You're of course allowed to have your opinion. But I was like, wow, really? Like I genuinely dislike that movie. I was surprised but there are people out there who genuinely love it. Prometheus, another one, hilarious. I went to get my haircut today, and my barber was saying him and his dad are going to see Romulus tomorrow, because he hadn't seen it yet, and he's waiting for his dad to come into town because they grew up watching Alien films together. And he asked me, he's like, is it good? And I said, I really, really liked it. And he's like, and we're sitting there talking about Romulus, and I was trying not to tell him too much about the movie. I was just kind of telling him what I liked about it. And he goes, you know what? I really love Prometheus. That was one of my favorite films. And I was like, I hated it, but but that's the point. That's what there's these differing opinions. Now, the reason why I say it's the greatest sci-fi franchise of all time is that reason, because there are people out there who swear by Resurrection, who swear by Prometheus, who swear by Covenant, who swear by Alien, who swear by Aliens. That's a pretty wide variety. I've not really heard anyone just be like, now, of course, there's going to be some people who say, I hated Resurrection, I hated Alien 3. There's a lot of people who hate Alien 3. There's a lot of people who love Alien 3. But I think the difference is that I think while everyone has wildly different opinions, that's totally okay, and I welcome that. I'll point fingers at Star Wars in particular, and that has this massive, massive universe of films and TV, and it's even bigger than Alien, of course.
It's humongous, yeah.
But I grew up as a Star Wars fan. I have Star Wars posters framed and hung on my wall. So I'm not trying to sit here and say I'm not trying to look at how cool I am, because I'm just saying I am a legitimate Star Wars fan. I love Star Wars. But even I, as a Star Wars fan, I met Mark Hamill one time, and it was one of the coolest moments of my life. I always remember meeting Mark Hamill. There seemed to be a more general consensus with some of the prequels and some of the sequels, where the vast majority of the hardcore Star Wars audience was like, this didn't work. This just didn't work.
Yeah.
Now, yes, there's going to be the outliers. There's going to be the outliers say Phantom Menace is the best Star Wars. So, of course, there's going to be a couple outliers. But I think you've been around enough Star Wars fans in your life being
Oh
a
yeah.
Comic Con and stuff to know that I would say that the majority, not everybody, the majority would say like they didn't like Rise of Skywalker. There, of course, there's going to be the outliers. Say I loved Rise of Skywalker, but that's not Alien, which is odd. There are people who are legitimately like Alien Resurrection is my favorite Alien film,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm like stunned by that. You know, and it's not like one or two people. There's outliers who are like Phantom Menace is incredible. But the vast majority of hardcore Star Wars fans are like, just, you know, I like Darth Maul and, you know, it was cool to see, you know, I guess Qui-Gon was kind of cool. Like, you know, they'll find things to like about it, but you generally don't hear a lot of hardcore Star Wars fans defending some of those movies. Some of them, I think we all kind of generally agree, are pretty bad, and they really blew it on these sequels recently. That's not the case with Alien. I think that's what separates it because there are legitimately fans of even the films that I don't like. There are people like just today, my barber's like, I love Prometheus, and I'm like, I hated that movie. But that's what I'm saying. And so I think to your point about the quality, I think that speaks to the quality of the films. But I also think that speaks to the wide variety of fans of this franchise, that there are legitimately huge fans of every film in this entire 9-film series, or at least let's say 7-film series, the dedicated Alien films, not even the crossover films. And I don't feel like that's the case. I grew up liking Star Trek as well. There are a lot of people who like Star Trek, and I like Star Trek. But there's a lot of people who think like the Star Trek the motion picture was one of the most boring, just awful films. Like it's almost like they disowned it and like let's just talk about Wrath of Khan because that is like one of the greatest Star Trek movies. They're like Star Trek the motion picture. What is that? We don't think about that movie. That doesn't exist. Let's talk about Wrath of Khan. I don't feel like that for Alien. I really don't. I like yes, there are people who hate certain films of this franchise. I hate certain films of this franchise. But even the films that I hate, there's a big group of people who are like, I love that movie.
Yeah, because I think because the studio took their time over all these years, that there are generation blocks that enjoy it for their little generation. We all know that the movie you grew up with is probably the movie you're going to love the most. You and I grew up with Aliens. I'm just like you. I grew up watching Aliens. I didn't get to Alien till later. And then when I really started to study the craft of film, I realized that Alien was one of the most well-crafted movies I have ever seen. I just bar none. I don't give a shit what category it's in. Sci-fi, drama, horror, I don't give a shit. It's an incredibly made movie. And then on top of that, it's just a fucking awesome horror movie and an awesome sci-fi movie. But those were the ones that we grew up with. And you and I are the same in that respect. We went to the theater to see Alien 3. That was our first chance to see an Alien movie in the theater. It was a big fucking deal. Well, there's some people that are a little younger than us that know about Alien and Aliens and know about Alien 3 and probably saw Alien 3 on HBO when they were kids. And then all of a sudden this movie Alien Resurrection came out. And they were like, oh shit, I'm going to go see that because I like all those those old movies that are kind of cool. And they just love that one. They went for that one. Then there's an AVP generation who are just like, yeah, there were these cool action movies where aliens and predators fought each other and they were pretty big and bodacious and all this shit. And then there's a whole other generation, like some Gen Zers-ish and really young millennials who are like, no, 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 no. When I was 14, 15, it was all about Prometheus and Covenant, these huge sci-fi events, by the way. They were not small movies. These were big movies that everybody showed up to. They were massive, massive hits. And well, you know, I say hits, like, you know, numbers wise they were hits. Critically, they didn't do great. But like there were kids from that era that were just like, no, that I experienced those movies. And because of that quality, and because of the quality of the acting, the quality of the directing, which we're about to get to, this franchise spans generations in a way that only something like a Star Wars or a Star Trek can be mentioned in. But as you so eloquently put, there are lots of people in those sci-fi franchises who go, I'm a next generation guy. I don't really like the Obi-Wan series. We don't have that in the Alien franchise. It's just like these are my clump of movies that I love in the series. I guess those other ones are okay, I guess, but I just love these ones and I carry them around with me everywhere. That seems to be what I've learned over this past year.
Yeah, it's actually kind of remarkable. I think that's one of my biggest takeaway, and that's why I said I do rank it as the best because it's a little different level of fandom. Again, we've talked about, fandom can be toxic, and people's, obsession with some of these franchises can get a little, teetering on scary.
Oh
But
God,
I,
I'm looking at you,
I
Star
think,
Wars.
but I think that's what I've learned though. Is like I said, like Alien, genuinely, there are big fans of every single movie, and I don't feel that way about Star Trek, and I don't feel that way about Star Wars. And again, I know there's gonna be someone who's gonna be up on Twitter or Instagram and be like, "Dude, I love Rise of Skywalker. It's the greatest film." I understand there are a few people. But the vast majority of Star Wars fans do agree on a couple of those movies are just like, yeah, let's not talk about that one. Like let's pretend that would never happen. And that, like, while I may feel that way about a couple of films of the Alien franchise, there's legitimately a film reviewer whose opinion I do respect on TikTok, and I'll just say it's a she. I'm not gonna say who it is, but it's a she. And she had Alien Resurrection. I think it's like her second favorite film, and she described why she liked it, and what she loved about it. And I was like, wow, like, and she wasn't, she wasn't being facetious or contradictory just for the sake of doing it. She was just genuinely talking about why she loved it. And I was like, okay, things you're talking about you loved, I didn't love, but she was passionate about why she loved it. And I was like, okay, well, that's different. And I think that's what I learned about this franchise is there's not a Star Trek the motion picture, and there's not a Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker where the vast majority of people are like, let's just pretend these films didn't happen. There's a hardcore fan base in Alien that loves Resurrection, that loves Prometheus, that loves Covenant. So I think that is kind of what separates this.
Damon, can we talk about the other thing that probably makes this the best franchise of all sci-fi franchises?
Absolutely.
Damon, this might be, and let me stop with the fucking preamble. This is the greatest lineup of directors in any horror franchise that I have ever seen. Of course, there's a bunch of great indie guys. Don't get me wrong. Like there's, the Stuart Gordons, the Cascarellis and stuff like that. Like, I'm not diminishing anybody. Just listen to this lineup for a second. Ridley Scott, James Cameron, David Fincher, Ridley Scott again. like, even the guy who did Resurrection is an incredible. I should have his name. Oh, I do have it here. Hold on a second. Let me credit him because he is a very good director. Oh shit, I don't have it. Damon, we're gonna have to edit this out. I thought I had it up. I had Alien 3 up.
Alien Resurrection, directed by Jean-Pierre Jeunet.
Jean-Pierre Jeunet, who directed, in my opinion, my least favorite Alien movie. He is an incredible director, all in his own right. And then when Romulus came around, Fede Alvarez is named the new director, and you and I both perked up because we know he makes good horror films. We were like, wow, that guy's good. This is a whole roster of no miss directors. I mean, okay, so there are misses in there, but in the Alien franchise, they all did their job correctly. Like they're all competent, really strong directors. And then, some of them got their start. Some of them, others, they kind of dipped their toe in during that time. Jean-Pierre was one of them who dipped his toe during his career into the Alien franchise, and others really cut their teeth becoming Alien directors. I think Fede Alvarez is going to become a much more common name because of Romulus. The hardcore horror fans knew who he was, but I think a lot more people are going to know him after Romulus came out. This is an incredible roster of directors.
Well, I mean, listen, it's almost unfair, honestly, to say this isn't, because you have David Fincher hasn't won an Oscar yet, has he? Has he won an Oscar?
God, I don't know. That's a good question.
I don't think he has. I don't think David Fincher's won an Oscar. I think he's been nominated, but I don't think he's won.
As a director, I highly doubt he's won. No.
Yeah. But James Cameron has won. He won for Titanic, of course. Or Ridley Scott has won for Gladiator. He won Best Director, right? Am I remembering that correctly?
I don't know. I don't know if he won Best Director. I'm not sure. He's been nominated a mountain of times.
Let's just say Oscar-winning films, like Oscar-winning films. Gladiator. I mean, Ridley Scott's got a bunch of films that have been nominated for Oscars or won Oscars, even if he didn't win Best Director. But he's had a bunch of films in there that have. Let's see, Academy Awards. He's been nominated nominated 4 times for Thelma and Louise, Gladiator, Black Hawk Down, and The Martian, but he didn't win. So he hasn't won Best Director.
And listen to those movies that he's done.
Yeah.
I mean, those are huge.
Yeah. Yeah, and James Cameron won for Titanic, and David Fincher, of course, Seven and The Social Network. Social Network should have won a lot more Oscars than it did. And just go on down the list of David Fincher movies. Those 3, without even talking about the other films, have just trumped every other franchise, period.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, come on now. I'm not saying that to be cruel to other franchises. Like, again, I'm the massive Scream and Nightmare on Elm Street guy. I have 3 Ghostface masks behind me, and I have a giant Nightmare on Elm Street poster on both sides of this other side of this wall. My 2 favorite horror franchises. Wes Craven is like a god to me. I grew up adoring Wes Craven. That's one of my all-time favorite directors, period. Not even just horror, period. And then, of course, also with Nightmare on Elm Street, but then you talk about like Rennie Harlan is also involved with Nightmare on Elm Street.
Yeah.
And, Chuck Russell, who did part 3. I love directors in both those series. Absolutely. The Radio Silence guys who did the last 2 Scream movies. Again, I love them. But then Ridley Scott. And again, this is a guy who didn't just stick around horror sci-fi. I mean, yes, he did Blade Runner, which is also an incredible achievement in sci-fi. And then, of course, he did Alien and all these other Alien movies.
The Martian.
Then, I mentioned I was just watching The Martian again the other night. That is one of my all-time favorite films, period. Like,
yeah.
Full stop. Love it. Absolutely love that film. We're going to science the shit out of it. I love that movie. Gladiator. They're doing Gladiator 2. I mentioned, Thelma and Louise. I watched Thelma and Louise last year. I hadn't seen Thelma and Louise in several years. It was on cable. It was on like Showtime or Cinemax or one of those networks. And I hadn't watched Thelma and Louise in like a decade. And I realized what a fucking masterful piece of filmmaking that is. Yeah. I mean, I forgot how good that movie was because I hadn't seen it in a few years. I was like, holy shit, this is a good movie. Thelma and Louise is genius. What a great movie that is. So many great performances in that movie. And I was like, oh, that's Ridley Scott as well. So it's just like, it's unfair. It's almost like an NFL team playing a high school football team. It's just not fair. Like, yeah, you're going to play football and you both play football, but one of you are all pros and you're going to make millions of dollars. The other ones are still in high school. It's just not a fair competition. David Fincher, who, as we well documented in our Alien 3 review, basically disowns that movie. He doesn't even like to talk about it, doesn't even really want to put it on his filmography. But the reality is, for better or worse, they did pick David Fincher, and that's his first ever directing. Now, we know a lot of first-time directors direct something that goes poorly, and you kind of never hear from them again, or they just, they kind of fade into like B or C level obscurity after a bad opening. David Fincher spiraled and became Seven and Social Network and Fight Club, and I mean, one of the most prolific directors of the 20th and 21st centuries. You don't know that when you do Alien 3 in the 90s, but that's what happened. So those 3 directors, and I'm certainly not trying to disrespect, Jean-Pierre Jeunet or I'll disrespect Paul W.S. Anderson for the Alien Resurrection or the Alien vs. Predator films. And my opinion on Fede Alvarez. I love Fede Alvarez. I think he's incredible. I love his work. But come on. It's Ridley Scott, James Cameron, and David Fincher. That's it. Like that's like this. That's like the 1992. I'm using sport metaphors all night tonight. That's like the 1992 Dream Team when we sent Jordan and Magic Johnson and like the first time ever the NBA team, and they just went over and absolutely crushed everybody by like 100 points. That's what this is. Like you can't listen. I like George. I like Star Wars. I like I like J.J. Abrams. I'm a big J.J. Abrams guy. I loved Lost, one of my all-time favorite shows. J.J. Abrams compared to David Fincher in their body of work, it's not a fair comparison in terms of like just magnitude of what they've done. Ridley Scott, James, I mean, come on. I'm not trying to insult these guys. I'm just saying it's not a fair comparison.
Terminator 2, The Abyss, True Lies, Titanic. You could feel however you want to feel about Avatar. It's the highest grossing film of all time. You know what I mean? Like you're just dealing with like these insane heavyweights that just come in and just crush. Like it's really weird how that's going. And it makes me think like Fede Alvarez, I think, is about to make the jump. Like, I think it's like because of what Romulus did, and it did a very good box office number for them, really the numbers they wanted to see. I think like he's going to get to do whatever he wants next. And let's see how he handles all of that. Like it's kind of exciting now. And Noah Hawley, you and I both know, he did the Fargo series. He did my favorite Marvel thing ever, the Legion series. This guy does TV like nobody else does TV. So who knows what that's about to look like. This is just, they have made the Alien franchise a director's medium.
And also to Ridley Scott, like, again, I don't love everything Ridley Scott has done, but the fact that Ridley Scott keeps coming back says a lot about this franchise because he doesn't need Alien now. He's got a million other projects thrown his way. He's got Gladiator 2 coming out. He just did, The House of Gucci a couple years ago. Like Ridley Scott, and he's an older guy. He's fully in demand. He does not need to ever return to Alien. But he did for Prometheus. He did for Covenant, and he still even consulted with Fede Alvarez on Romulus. And again, remember, this is not his story. He directed it, but he didn't write it. As I mentioned at the beginning, Dan O'Bannon and Ronald Shusett were the ones who created Alien back in the day. And Walter Hill had a big hand in that as well, a great producer and director in his own right, directed 48 Hours, one of my all-time favorite comedies. But Ridley Scott doesn't need Alien. Look at his freaking filmography. This guy can do anything he wants. But he keeps coming back. Why? Because he loves it. And that says a lot. Like James Cameron still passionately talks about aliens. He made one film. And it was early, still very early in his career, 86, and then coming out in 87. He's gone on to do a billion things since then. Terminator 2 is like one of the most beloved sequels in the history of the world. True Lies, which I think is one of the most brilliant action comedies ever made. Avatar, as you mentioned, the highest grossing film of all time. But every single time James Cameron does like a big interview, and not just like a specific interview about the film he's working on right now, they always bring up aliens. Always. It's one film. Always bring up aliens because it's such an impact. And
it comes up more than Terminator.
Yeah, it does. And you can tell he still likes talking about it because it was a passion. He loved it. He wanted to do it. He sought out doing it. So again, it's just unfair. It's like I said, it's an unfair comparison to say, like, is this the greatest? No, it is the greatest assembly of directors ever in horror, in sci-fi, or you could say anything. Like, I don't know what other great franchises are out there. Like, obviously, I like Marvel. I'm a big Marvel guy. I like the Russo brothers, but come on now,
yeah,
that's that goes back to my dream team. Like, I'm not trying to insult the Russo brothers, but that's like Michael Jordan playing against like the high school player. Like, it's just not the same. Yeah. So it's not. We can debate, is it the greatest sci-fi franchise of all time? And I can hear arguments about Star Wars, Star Trek, whatever.
Sure.
There is no argument. Just those three, Fincher, Cameron, and Scott, are the greatest assembly directors to ever work on a sci-fi or a horror franchise. Period. I don't want to hear otherwise.
You can't say otherwise. But Damon, let's be real honest about something right now. Because yes, this collection of directors, unmatched in any franchise anywhere. But how do you get to part two? You get to part two, Damon, because you've got someone at the front of your film that carries it. And, okay, let's talk about the Marvel Cinematic Universe for a moment. Iron Man was the test, right? Well, what made Iron Man work? Robert Downey Jr. made Iron Man work. He sold a B-level character to the masses, and now he is literally one of the biggest superstars on the planet, but he did it. Well, Damon, the Alien franchise, all those great directors owe this franchise to one person and one person alone, and that is the incredible, the unstoppable, the indelible Sigourney Weaver. Sigourney Weaver, an unknown actor at the time that she took the role in Alien, created a character, Ellen Ripley, that is unlike any other character in any other franchise. Is she a final girl? She is. She's a final girl who fought tooth and fucking nail throughout the entire movie. She fought her coworkers in Alien. She fought the company. Then she fought the company man, then she fought the alien itself, barehanded, right? Okay, she had a harpoon. Fair enough. She launched this series. There was no aliens if Sigourney wasn't in it, and believe me, they were thinking about moving on without her. You needed that actor. You needed the actor that is Sigourney Weaver to anchor this franchise to usher it, at some point. And she said recently, she was at Venice Film Festival, she goes, I think Ripley deserves her rest with regards to like coming back. But is she curious? Well, who isn't curious? If you're going to back up $50 million to my house, I'd be curious too. But overall, she said, I think the character deserves to rest. I think she's right. But I think we wouldn't be standing here today talking about the Alien franchise if Ellen Ripley was not embodied by Sigourney Weaver.
Let me give a little inside baseball behind the scenes of us putting this episode together. You and I were talking about categories, and we were talking about like what categories do we want to do and rankings and so on and so forth. And we always do best performance. That's been one of our categories since day one of Rewind to the Living Dead, going all the way back 200 plus episodes ago. So we knew we were going to do that. And I actually said, I was like, let's just stop and not include Sigourney Weaver because we're both going to pick her if we're legitimately picking the best performance in Alien, because we're both going to do that. So why don't we just give her flowers and talk about her separately and then pick our best performance separately from Sigourney Weaver? Because much like the director conversation, it's an unfair category. You can't, listen, I love a lot of the performances in the Alien films. But then you look at what Sigourney Weaver did, and you're like, well, yeah, okay, it's just, it's not really fair. So that's why we're just talking about Sigourney Weaver. We are going to give our best performances in that category is basically best performance by somebody other than Sigourney Weaver. As you mentioned, 28 years old, I think, when she got cast in Alien, had done theater and a couple of TV spots. That's it. And she did Alien and became a massive star. From 1979 to 1987, you could argue that Sigourney Weaver was the biggest box office woman in Hollywood because you not only had Alien, then you had Ghostbusters, which was massive in 1984, and that was another huge hit for her. And then, of course, 1986, 87 was Aliens, and she got nominated for an Academy Award for her role as Ripley in Aliens. When I told you that, you're like, really? I was like, yeah, I looked it up. She died. I didn't know it either until I started doing research. That's the one time she got nominated for and as prolific as her career has been, that's the closest she's come to winning an Oscar was for Aliens. This was Sigourney Weaver's time. This was Sigourney Weaver's world. We're just living in it. She was everything you could encapsulate about a heroine, about a final girl, about a leading character, a leading woman. Because you remember, while there's still a lot of work to be done in terms of equality, even in filmmaking, people don't scoff at the idea that Scarlett Johansson can lead a franchise or lead a big film these days. She's going to lead the new Jurassic Park film. People don't scoff when you say, I'm trying to think of other, big name, like when people say Amy Adams is going to lead a film. Okay, like no one,
Charlize Theron.
Charlize Theron, yeah. Just you say when you mention Jodie Foster, everyone's like, ooh, Jodie Foster. Doesn't even bat an eye. That's not what happened in the early 80s. Women didn't get to lead franchises. Women did not get to lead blockbusters. Sigourney Weaver was the first. And you mentioned when they were doing the Alien sequel, they didn't even know they had her. James Cameron had written a script involving Ripley and found out at the end of it that 20th Century Fox had not even bothered to ask Sigourney Weaver to come back at that point. And he's like, the fuck? Like, my entire script is built around her. And so she found out about this, and I don't want to revisit our Aliens episode, but she's like, oh, you wrote a whole sequel about me. Awesome. I want $1 million, which was unheard of for an actor, for a woman at that point in time. Unheard of. Oh, you wrote a whole script about me. You want me to come back for the sequel? Great. Give me $1 million. And James Cameron's like, there's no way we can do this without her. And Fox is like, okay, back up the Brinks truck. Here you go, Sigourney. Sigourney Weaver not only created this role, because you can't be Ripley without Sigourney Weaver, period. Can't. Impossible. She created the greatest women's hero character in sci-fi or horror history, in my opinion. That's my opinion.
Mine too.
And then outside of that, just in terms of the acting, she broke barriers that had never been. She crushed the glass ceiling. Every I'm not saying like, Scarlett Johansson when she got cast in Black Widow needed to send like a bouquet of flowers to Sigourney Weaver, but every woman who has led a franchise, and I'm talking like the big blockbuster franchises since then, owes at least a small thanks to Sigourney Weaver for what she did in Aliens and then by proxy doing in Aliens, because she broke the ceiling. So it's wide reaching beyond her performance, which is brilliant. I also got to pay credit to the woman, the savvy businesswoman.
Yes.
Who was just like, yeah, I'll do it. Sure, I'll keep doing these movies. Pay me a fuck ton of money. And they're like, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
And it's because of the quality that she brought to it too. I think she did show, like, she paved the way by saying, like, I'm also going to act my ass off. Like, it's going to be good. Name another action star that gets an Oscar nom for a sci-fi movie. It doesn't really happen a lot. You know what I mean? Every now and then it'll happen. It does not happen a ton. She's an incredible actor on top of all of this. And we belabored it in both the Aliens, and even Alien 3 films. Even Alien 3, which we said is light on story, is great on Ripley. Boy, like, she carries a movie. She can. I grew up, just like you, with Indiana Jones, with James Bond, with The Goonies, all these action movies that are fronted by men and all that stuff. But my favorite action star since I'm a kid has been Ellen Ripley. That is my number one. If anyone, who's your favorite action star? Sigourney Weaver as Ellen Ripley. Every time, without question, she brings a humanity, a strength, character. She's funny in her way, in a very like Sigourney Weaver way, kind of the way Jack Nicholson's funny, the way Jack can only be Jack, right? Sigourney can be Sigourney in her own way. It's such a special thing that this franchise has. It's a miracle the franchise can survive outside of her, but clearly the numbers say that yes, it can, and that's fine. But it took that anchor, Sigourney Weaver being the anchor, that actually kept the franchise going, that actually said, we'll keep making them even beyond Ellen Ripley's character, because the character of Ellen Ripley is so strong and can command such attention that this franchise can live on without her. Talk about she's mothering. That's ultimate mothering, is what Sigourney Weaver has done with Alien.
And I think the last thing I'll say on this is that not only was Sigourney Weaver great, but I think when you look at the character of Ellen Ripley was a badass. She was not in that, and this is not, I'm not, that you know this as well as I do, Patrick, in the 70s and 80s, a lot of the lead women characters in films were the damsel in distress. They had to be rescued by the man. They had a leading role, don't get me wrong, but they were playing second fiddle to the leading man. And that's where I said Sigourney Weaver broke a glass ceiling in that regard. And I got to give credit, because the original script by Dan O'Bannon and Ronald Shusett had an all-male cast or an all-male crew, but they said it could be interchangeable. Like, there was nothing that was like male-specific, and so they ended up casting, obviously, Veronica Cartwright and Sigourney Weaver in those roles. And that was a big part of Ridley Scott going in and saying, listen, let's switch this and put a woman in this role. Like, let's put this woman in the role of Ripley. And then, so even that, like, remember, that was a strong lead character that was written just kind of like genderless, but it was supposed to be a man originally. Like, they cast it as a man. They said it's a man, but they said it's kind of genderless, but it's a man. And they said, well, let's put a woman in there. And of course, Sigourney Weaver stole the show. And then credit where credit's due, James Cameron comes in. And, let's not forget Sarah Connor, who, became another iconic sci-fi character thanks to Linda Hamilton, who is another all-time badass. This is James Cameron saying, yeah, Ripley's a badass. Like, I'm going to write her as a badass. And he does. And she kicks all sorts of ass in Aliens. She doesn't need to be rescued by anybody. She's rescuing people. She's the badass. So I want to give credit to those two filmmakers for not only casting her, of course, originally an Alien, but also having the foresight and the vision to say, she doesn't need to be the damsel in distress. She doesn't need to be rescued. She's going to be the badass leading these films. We don't really think about that now when, like I said, when you see Scarlett Johansson cast in a lead role, or she's a heroine, you're like, oh, okay, Scarlett Johansson, she's awesome, or whoever.
Sure, why not? Yeah.
Yeah, Jennifer Lawrence, whoever. You're like, oh, cool, Jennifer Lawrence. Scream. Like, we don't bat an eye that Neve Campbell is in all of those films. Oh, Neve Campbell, she's fucking awesome. Don't even think about it now. But that's not the case in the late 70s and early 80s. Sigourney Weaver changed that. James Cameron changed that. Ridley Scott changed that.
They really did, and I brought up a minute ago the idea that like it was such a strong character that now the franchise can live on even without Ripley. Damon, what should the franchise look like from this point on?
So, this is a really interesting question because my biggest concern about going back into the Alien franchise, and this was before Romulus came out, was don't mess with the mythology. And I'm not going to repeat myself, but I'll just give the short the short version of I didn't want Alien Romulus to somehow have Ripley show up in her frozen, in the frozen ship, and somehow she just like floats through the screen. Or I didn't want Sergeant A. Pone to pop up in the finals, in the final thing, chomping a cigar, going, "All right, sweethearts, let's go." I didn't want that. And to Romulus's credit, while they did teeter on a couple of things here and there, they never blew away. They never tried to blow up the mythology. They didn't say, "Oh, we were actually on the same planet at the same time as Alien." They just didn't know we were there. None of that happened. So as far as where the future goes, I had faith in Fede Alvarez, and he delivered. I have faith in Noah Hawley. I have a hard time believing that guy is really good. He's really good. I have a hard time believing he's not going to deliver. So my 2 points for the future. One, if you're going to do sequels, you're going to do films set in the Alien universe, don't mess with the mythology. I don't need you to resurrect Ripley's daughter and suddenly she's a heroine. None of that. I don't need that. Don't do that. Part 2 of that, I know people are going to say, "Dude, I don't want to see that." You probably don't want to see what I'm about to suggest, but I'm going to throw it out there. Sigourney Weaver said, maybe it's time for Ripley to rest, but I'll always listen. I'll listen to ideas if they come across. We just talked about like how the original Halloween 2018, how good it was. Now it got completely messed up in the next 2 films following it, but 2018's Halloween was great. I'm not saying they should do this. I'm not even saying they will do this. But if James Cameron puts down the writing and camera for Avatar 98, and he writes a script and he says, "You know what?" Because if you listen to Sigourney and you listen to James Cameron, both of them, when they talk about Alien 3, the biggest thing they had a problem with that film is the same thing I have a problem with. They didn't like what happened to Hicks and Newt. They didn't like the way they were just kind of like written out at the beginning of that film. Neither one of them liked it. Do a direct sequel to Aliens with James Cameron directing. Bring back Michael Biehn all these years later. I know they're older. I'm not saying you ruin it. I understand people are like, "Well, you ruined the mythology." That's the one instance where it could work. If James Cameron decided to come back and said, "I want to make a new Aliens film and I want Sigourney Weaver back and I want Michael Biehn back." I don't know if they can get Carrie Hinn back because she's like a school teacher now, but bring, some version of that. If they want to do a direct sequel to Aliens and somehow, just like in the series with them that way, I would be like, "All right, cool." And you'd be on the theater first night too. Don't lie. That's it though. Otherwise, don't mess with it. I don't need another Ripley to come in. I don't need Ripley's daughter to show up. I don't need Apone to show up. I don't need Hudson or Hicks or anybody else to show up. Just do what Noah Hawley, hopefully what Noah Hawley's doing, do what Fede Alvarez did. That's my hope for the future. What about you?
I'm in the same boat. Don't mess with the future. And I'm even saying don't mess with Alien 3. And I know everybody's, even including Sigourney and James Cameron, are upset with what they did in Alien 3. Let it live. Let it live. In fact, I think my biggest problem with Resurrection is they didn't let it live. Like, they didn't let it die. She dies in Alien 3 and they didn't let it. More importantly to me than anything, and I saw glimpses of it, and I say glimpses, I think it's the bookends of Romulus, is do not miss out on the fact that this has been, since the beginning, a story about class warfare. These are regular people going up against major corporations, weapons manufacturers, these people that see that these corporations that see people as nothing but numbers on a spreadsheet. That is the permeating theme throughout this franchise. Don't lose sight of that. It is the guiding light. It is the through line for all the best movies in the entire franchise. Even the prequels, Covenant and Prometheus, have a tinge of that still laced in there. Do not forget that Alien at its core is a movie about the sins of the greedy affecting regular people. What I love about Alien is that they always say truckers in space, truckers in space. They were regular people. They didn't feel like sci-fi, robot-y, weird, like strange accents like they lived on other planets and they're humanoids or anything. They were regular schmoes like you and I doing their job, and their job got fucked over by some corporate greed. That's the story of Alien. That's the story of Aliens. It's the story of Alien 3. Is that the little guy has a boot on his neck, and that boot has a little Wayland Utani badge on it. Don't forget that piece. That's all. Play with ideas. Expand the mythology. There's a lot of it. It's all over the books. It's all over ancillary materials, video games, comics. We saw a little sprinkling of that in Alien Romulus. Damon didn't love it. We won't get into that. But there's so much that you can play with, but don't forget what sandbox you're playing in. And it's the class warfare. And that, I think that because all of the movies that I love from the 1970s, they lifted the veil on American life. It wasn't the glitz and glamour and the polished look of the 1950s and stuff. They were like, no, like America has and continues to suck, and it's difficult for a lot of people. And that resonated with me as a kid because I grew up in a difficult situation. I know you did too. And I realized that Alien very much reflects that. It's like the world will continue to exploit people that are willing to work for $1. Don't miss out on that. Don't keep that guiding light as this franchise continues on, which is ironic, right? This multi-billion-dollar franchise that is its own Wayland Utani Corporation. Don't miss out on that story, because that story is what keeps the heroes interesting. That's what keeps us rooting for them to win. And so it doesn't just turn into, well, what's the next Alien Splatterfest? Because that's what I'm looking for.
It's funny you say that because the underlying story in most of the Alien franchise films is that the big guy crushing the little guy or trying to crush the little guy, and the little guy trying to overcome the boot on his neck, as you mentioned. And not to get way off topic, but just correlated to what you said about America. Like right now, we have this thing going on in the country where it's like educators don't want to teach us about the bad parts of what happened in America. And I'm like, how do we it's the old saying of if you don't learn from the past, you're doomed to repeat those mistakes. How are you gonna prevent things from happening if we don't know what happened? How do you know? So people are like, oh, let's not discuss the horrible things that happened in America. It happened. How do you not discuss it? And I think Alien's a reflection of that. Like, this is a legitimate story about the big guy crushing the little guy. And how do you overcome that? And in reality, you really don't. I mean, Ripley doesn't make it out. She doesn't live. She dies in Alien 3, as opposed to letting them take her, and they were never going to let her live anyways. They were just going to take the alien out of her body. But yeah, it was. So it's not like there's a happy ending here. It's not like they wrote this where Ripley's all going off in the sunset with Hicks and raising Newt. No, that doesn't happen. And we always joke, we used to have a category saying, could we survive this? We still have it as a category in some films, but could we survive this horror film? When we started realizing we were doing the Alien films, we're like, if you go up against a xenomorph, chances are you're not getting out of there. And so I think that's kind of the point of the larger overarching story you mentioned about the class warfare of these stories is I know that's not at the center for a lot of people. It's a cool movie about humans versus these killing machine aliens. I get that, and that's fine. That's totally great. But yeah, there's an underlying story there that you can pay attention to, and the reality of these films, the vast majority doesn't give you a happy. I mean, even though Ripley survives Alien, well, everyone else died. It's like Ripley survived, but everyone else in the crew died. Aliens, yes, Hicks and Newt make it, and you're kind of happy because in that moment you're like, oh, they got a little nuclear family there, But Bishop got ripped apart. Apone's dead. Drake's dead. Everyone else is dead. Hudson. So while there are survivors, just like any great horror film, you lose a lot of people along the way. Then Alien 3, Ripley dies. So I think these films are they are great stories, and as you said, class warfare. But again, they're not necessarily happy endings either. Like you don't look at these films and be like, oh man, what a feel good movie. So, you know,
Yeah, I mean, it's. I guess the point is like those themes. Those themes are what keep these quality stories. Because
yeah,
then you get into, and that's kind of why you and I just ignored AVP and AVP Requiem because we were just like, those are cash grab action movies. They're not. They're not deeply rooted in the idea of us versus the big dogs. You know, it's not. That's not really what those movies are about. They're just big action team ups. That's kind of what they are. So if you want to keep the quality high, you keep that theme like deep, sewn deep into the DNA of these movies.
yeah. So yeah, I agree. I totally agree. But yeah, and like I said, while I joke, well, I'm not really joking. Like I said, if James Cameron came back and said I want to do an Alien sequel, I would certainly not mind that. But I think we can all pretty much say it's probably never going to happen. Outside of that, though, just like I said, my biggest thing is just, dude, make stories, make a million stories. Keep making these for the next 25, 30 years. Just don't mess with just don't mess. That's my biggest. Don't mess with mythology. Leave it what it is. Like we can forget Alien Resurrection. I think that's okay. Because that takes place like 200 years in the future. So
Yeah.
like, let's just kind of pretend that doesn't happen anyways. But outside of that, like just do your thing. Just, I don't need a new Ripley. I don't need Apone coming back. None of that. Just, make your story. Do what Fede Alvarez did or do hopefully what I assume Noah Hawley's doing. Patrick, let's move on to our next category. We talked about Sigourney Weaver is obviously the best performance in this franchise because it's Sigourney freaking Weaver. But outside of Sigourney Weaver, our best performance not named Sigourney Weaver category, Patrick, who out of the entire Alien franchise do you give your best performance to, and what movie are they from?
My best performer, not named Sigourney Weaver, is Charles S. Dutton, who played Leonard Dillon in Alien 3. And if you go back and listen to that podcast, I'll spoil something for you. He was my best performance in that movie. There's one time in a Ripley movie where somebody outperformed Ripley, and that was Charles S. Dutton playing Dillon. He had this incredible, like, because Alien 3 almost is like a stage play if you really look at it, like the way it kind of works itself out. It's almost like a one room thing, like this prison is kind of one place. And Charles S. Dutton has this almost operatic way about him. Like, and I was like, look at this guy actually challenging Sigourney Weaver on screen. Like, it's so hard to hold up to her. Even as great as Hicks is, against Sigourney, like he has to kind of cower to her. In fact, her love interest, plays by Charles Dance in Alien 3, he sort of takes the softer role. We get into that in Alien 3. Actually, there's a lot of interesting dynamics in Alien 3, but one of the most interesting things to me was how great his performance was against Sigourney Weaver. There are other great performances throughout the franchise, including in the movies that don't include her, but to outshine her, at least in my opinion, is a feat to behold.
Charles S. Dutton has to be one of the most criminally underrated actors ever. He did a show in the early '90s called Rock, which was a comedy show, sitcom show. I think it was on Fox.
Big show.
And then he's made sporadic appearances in other things, like he did Menace to Society, had a small kind of supporting role in that film. Made one episode appearance in The Sopranos, which is my all-time favorite TV show. He's kind of popped up here and there, but I don't know. I'm not going to sit here and speculate. I've not followed his entire career. I don't know if he just, kind of wanted to fade in and do his own thing. But to me, like, you could build, like, for instance, like, you look at James Gandolfini. He had been, he was great in True Romance. He had done other things he was great in, but he didn't really break out. He didn't become a household name until he did The Sopranos. And when he did The Sopranos, no one knew who James Gandolfini was going in. It's only after that series came out and everyone's like, holy shit, James Gandolfini is like one of the greatest living actors, period. I feel like Charles S. Dutton was like one role away from that. Like if he would have had, and Rock was great, but Rock was never a massive like cultural phenomenon.
Yeah.
I feel like if you put Charles S. Dutton in a show that was as well written and well directed and everything else The Sopranos was, he would be James Gandolfini. That's how good he is. He's an incredible actor. Yeah, I love him. He's great in that role. He's great in everything. If you ever see a movie with Charles S. Dutton, watch it. I promise you he's going to be good. Patrick, for me, in my best performance, not named Sigourney Weaver. There's a lot of choices, and I did like a lot of people, but I think it's well documented my passion and my love for aliens. And with that being said, one of my all-time favorite actors, period, and just my favorite performance in this movie, favorite performance is the great, the late Bill Paxton as Wayne Hudson in Aliens. He's manic. He's hilarious. He's all over the place. He is everything. He is one testicle all over the map in this performance, but I absolutely love it. And as great as Sigourney Weaver is in Aliens, and she is, she leads it, and everyone. I think that's one of the biggest strengths of Aliens is that entire cast, even like Frost, who you're with for 20 minutes maybe in that movie, has one of my favorite lines, of course, like, "What the hell are we supposed to use, man? Harsh language." Even the minor characters are good in that film, and that's a credit to Gale Ann Hurd and James Cameron, everyone who worked on Aliens. But Bill Paxton, again, at that point, wasn't a household name. He had done Terminator, a very small role in Terminator, and I think Weird Science was after this and things like that. But that role, like, imagine Aliens without Bill Paxton. It's a different movie, totally different movie. It's not the same movie. I love Michael Biehn. I think Michael Biehn is criminally underrated as well. I think he's a guy who should have had a much bigger career. I don't know that he wanted. I'm just saying, like, I think that guy is awesome. Like, he should have been the action star of the 90s. He obviously did Terminator and Aliens. Not like he didn't have big movies, but like that guy is so incredible as well. But imagine taking Bill Paxton. Imagine anyone else trying to play Hudson. It's just not the same.
You know what Bill Paxton's Hudson is? He's the most lovable character in the Alien franchise of all time. He's absolutely lovable. Like, he's a doofus. He's funny. He's a shit kicker. He's a fuck off in all the funnest ways. And you just love him for it. You absolutely love him for it. You know what I mean? And it breaks your heart when he goes down, but he doesn't go out any old way. He goes out the Hudson way, right? Firing this one, firing off on that one, getting swarmed on by a bunch of aliens, and he goes out as best he can. But he was lovable. And Bill Paxton was lovable. It's funny, there was like a big Twitter discussion about Bill Paxton. It's like, and somebody wrote, like, what's the movie besides Aliens that you could name Bill Paxton for? Even that person knew. Everybody knows Bill Paxton for his role in Aliens. Now, mind you, my answer was, if you don't know the movie Frailty, you're fucking up, because that was an incredible movie that he directed and he acted in. He was great. But Hudson is the most lovable character in the entire Alien franchise, and that's because of what the late great Bill Paxton did.
And I know him and James Cameron were very close, of course, because he cast him in Terminator, cast him in Aliens, and of course he cast him in Titanic, and he did True Lies as well. They were good friends, and they worked together many times. But man, like James Cameron wrote almost every great line in Aliens is uttered by Hudson. Not everyone, but almost everyone when you think about it.
There's a lot of great lines in Aliens.
We're on an express elevator to hell, going down. Yeah, and then of course, like I said, we all know, we all know my favorite, the game over, which is one of the most iconic lines. But like everything, like he just has the great lines in that movie. And also, this isn't a category we really prefaced. If you take again Sigourney Weaver out, because she does die in Alien 3, I think you got to say Hudson is the saddest death, because everyone loved him. Like, as much as I'm not saying I rooted for the characters in Alien to die. Like, I certainly didn't. I loved the characters in Alien. Like, Yaphet Kotto's character is one of my favorites. I love him. Like, I didn't want him to die. And I certainly didn't I liked Charles Dance, who is a great actor, of course. Tywin Lannister, great actor. His death was like, oh shit, like didn't see it coming when it happened. Charles S. Dutton, knowing how his whole thing ended. Very sad, because that was very much like the corporation just stomping on his neck and just be like, get out of our way, we want to get to our creature. But Hudson was so beloved. Has there ever been one more character where everyone's just like, no, not Hudson?
Yeah, I think everybody's so upset that he's gone. But I mean, stick around. There are other categories, and there may be new lovable characters coming down the line.
Yeah. So, Patrick, let's move on to our next category. And this is an interesting one. I'm taking credit because this was my idea. who is your favorite villain in the Alien franchise? Now, much like our Sigourney Weaver category, who is your favorite villain that's not a xenomorph? Because you have to remember, every Alien film, for the most part, while the xenomorphs, when they show up, not counting Prometheus, because whatever, yes, they are like the big bad. They are the overarching villain. But there's always another layer of villainy in every single Alien film. When you talk about Ash in the original, you talk about Burke and Aliens, you talk about Bishop's maker and Weyland-Yutani as a corporation in Alien 3. Go on down the line. So, Patrick, who is your favorite villain in the Alien franchise?
Damon, my favorite villain is the villain who made me realize that the villains are not the xenomorphs. And that is the late, great Ian Holm, who played Ash. And specifically Ash, the villain, not the new guy. What's his name? Rook?
Rook, yeah.
Yeah, not Rook, but Ash from Alien. I watched it again before Romulus to get prepped, and I realized just how villainous that character was. And he was the perfect embodiment of corporate greed, because the idea of corporate greed is fine, but it's kind of faceless. Like, you understand that the Weyland-Yutani Corporation is this gigantic corporation that owns half the galaxy. I mean, quite literally. I mean, how massive must they be? But Ash, he was under the radar. He was a spy. No one in that on that ship knew he was a droid. And it wasn't just that he was hiding he was a droid. He was hiding that he had a plan. He had a very specific plan. And in the extended cut of that movie of Alien, you'll learn that he indeed even knows that there's things going on. Like, he knows a lot more than he gives away. He was devious, he was evil, but he was so in control until he wasn't. And then when he was out of control, you have one of the most bizarre scenes in the entire franchise where he tries to violate Ripley's mouth with a rolled up magazine. You know, it's so odd and strange. And then thankfully, Yaphet Kotto knocks his block off, you know what I mean? In quite dramatic fashion. But it's such a sinister character. There are very few characters, a lot of great enemies, and I'm curious to see who your villain is. But I think Ash was the most sinister.
The Ash reveal is probably maybe the most iconic outside of the facehugger attaching itself to Kane, which was, one of the most shocking moments ever, because you just, again, it had never been done, so you didn't know it was coming. You knew it was coming in Aliens because we saw an alien. Outside of that moment, which to me is, and well, let me take that back. The facehugger and then the chest burster, those two combined, that's the most shocking moment ever. One of the most shocking moments ever in sci-fi or film history. But the revelation of Kane being not only working against the crew, but
Ash.
he's actually an android, or Ash, Ash. That Ash was an android and he was working against the crew the entire time, basically being like, we don't care about you. You are all expendable. Weyland-Yutani doesn't give two shits if you all die out here in a horrible blaze of glory. They want this creature. That's all they want. They don't care about you, your payload, your shipment, whatever. You're expendable. They want this creature. And that was such a cold moment. His turn, his reveal, and then, of course, the great line when he's like, I can't, what is the, I know you know the line, Patrick, when he's like, I can't help you, or what is just God.
But you have
God
my regards,
you.
yeah.
Yeah, you have my regards. It's just so cold and calculating, and it's just like, fuck. Like, it's just so sinister because you're like, oh, yeah, we're already going up against this massive, 8-foot tall, reptilian-looking, fucking two-mouthed, acid-bleeding creature. Oh, and we also have an android here ready to just fuck us over. It's just like the ultimate evil bad guy turn. It's great. Ash is incredible.
So who's your favorite villain, Damon?
So it's funny. When you get to Aliens, of course, everyone, when you meet Bishop and the moment happens at the cafeteria when they're eating and you see the white milk, blood, whatever you want to call it, and Ripley's immediately like, no one told me there'd be an android on board. And the entire movie is like distrusting Bishop, right? Because you're thinking it's another Ash. And we find out towards the end that Bishop was actually a good guy. But the real bad guy in Aliens, Burke, played by Paul Reiser, was such a wormy, little conniving, manipulative little bastard. I loved him because Burke is the definition of Weyland Yutani. He takes Ripley out there under false pretenses. We're just going out there to eliminate. She says, are we going out there to kill them? Not, he's like, absolutely. We're going out there to kill him. We don't want to save him. Great, I'll go. Manipulates Ripley to go back out after she literally just got home. He manipulates her to go back out there. Then they get out there and they find the creatures. They find the facehuggers and whatever. And he's still like, okay, we're going to do this. And after they get attacked and everyone gets wiped out, and they're like, only thing we do is, take off and nuke the site from orbit. It's the only way to be sure. And he's like, I can't allow you to do that. Immediately, the corporate fucking pig steps in again. He's like, can't allow that to happen. And of course, Corporal Hicks has military jurisdiction. He's like, we're going to take off and nuke the site from orbit. It's the only way to be sure. And Burke is, in his manipulative Weasley self is just like, fuck. He takes the next step when he dumps the fucking facehuggers in a locked room with Ripley and Newt because he doesn't give a fuck about them. They are expendable. They are just toys to get him to his ultimate goal of making a bunch of money for himself and for the Weyland Yutani Corporation. That is all he cares about. And that, of course, leads to this.
I say we grease this rat fuck son of a bitch right now.
another great Hudson line. That Burke was like the ultimate weasel because he wasn't physically strong. He certainly wasn't a badass by any stretch of the imagination, and he wasn't even as powerful as Ash as an android. Like Ash literally tried to physically overpower and kill Ripley. Burke wasn't overpowering anybody, but he was such a manipulative little Weasley bastard that he actually came closer to killing Ripley than almost anybody else by dropping a couple of facehuggers and locking the door. He was just oh my God, what a great villain he was. Paul Reiser just played it so perfectly too.
For lack of a better term, Burke is the ultimate pencil dick. Like that's what we called them, in the 80s, these suits, they were suits. And what their strength wasn't anything other than being Weasley, than being slime balls. And he was like, well, I can't take anybody out here, so I'll just weasel my way into getting what I want. That's very on brand, very on theme. Like he used, that's how corporate villainy looks. It comes in a little puffy vest and a collared shirt and some doughy eyes and just goes, I'm gonna go over there, and knocks over these jars and hopes everything goes well for him, so he can fuck everyone over for a percentage, as Ripley rightly points out. It's perfect corporate weasel shit, and he does it in this movie.
The perfect epitome of Burke is when Ripley is laying out like his plan. He planned to have the facehuggers attack them, and he was going to put them in stasis and then sabotage certain freezers on the way home. And he's just kind of looking there all like, looking at like, yeah, you kind of got me. And then I think it's Hudson goes, fuck! Like, that's like the definition. He's like, Jesus Christ! Like, that's how fucking manipulative this guy was when he just goes, fuck! You're dead, man. Like, he's just like, that's how evil Burke was, because he didn't care. And he was a human. He was unlike the android who didn't actually have the ability to show emotion. Burke was a human, and he still didn't care.
It's a great point. He was a human, and he was like, how do I fuck these people over?
Like, he didn't care. Even when they're getting attacked, he locks the door. Like, they're all trying to get away. The Marines who could save him, he's like, fuck all y'all. And he locks the door on them.
Perfect. He was a fucking slime ball.
He was a Weasley scumbag to the very end. Patrick, our next category, favorite Xenomorph. Now, there's a lot of variations of Xenomorph, even if you want to go into the weird fucking, I don't know what, protomorphs and all the other shit that's in Prometheus and all the other ones.
Yes.
I guess anything with the last name Morph, I guess qualifies here. But what was your favorite Xenomorph in the entire Alien franchise?
My favorite Xenomorph is the one I grew up with, Damon, and those are the alien soldiers in Aliens, in James Cameron's sequel. They were a little more heightened design. They're actually, James Cameron kind of, as only James Cameron could do, he said, I'm going to improve on H.R. Giger's design. Everyone goes, what? You can't do that. James Cameron goes, watch me. I'll do it. Because this is James Cameron we're talking about here. The man has an ego the size of LV-426. And he bulks them up. They look bigger, they look stronger, they're more ornate than they ever were before. And most importantly, Damon, they crawl all over the place like roaches. And there's many of them, you know, and mind you, this is Aliens. You're talking about we built every suit. There's no CG, even though he would, if he had CG at his disposal at the time, he would have used it. He said, all right, well, I don't know, let's build 10 suits, 15 suits. And they're like, what? Yeah, build me like 10 or 15 suits so I can get these shots where we see a bunch of them swarming up a crawl space or something like that. The way they moved, everyone knows this shot of Newt standing in that water and the alien rises up behind her. That's just some random alien soldier. But the presence is so dynamic and big and exciting that you go, well, oh, that must have been the part where the queen grabs her. It's like, nope, that wasn't the queen. That was just some random throwaway soldier. All his random throwaway aliens look so damn good, move so damn well, look great. When Hudson gets pulled into the pit with all those aliens and you see the hand of the alien, looks fucking phenomenal. Really fucking great. So that's my pick for my favorite Xenomorph is the alien soldiers.
I mean, when they go into the catacombs, when they find all the humans from LV-426 and they start saying it's something moving all around us, man. It's all around us. And you start seeing a little bit of movement on the walls because they're literally hiding on the walls. That's terrifying. When they open up the roof thing, they're in the ducts, the air ducts, and you see all these fucking things just pouring in at them. That's terrifying. Those, like, you know, you said, like, they're like roaches. Like, when you see a roach in your room, I don't care if it's one roach, you get scared because it's roaches. You know, if there's one roach, there's like 1,000 behind it. That's it. That was genius in Aliens. They just used it to such great extent. To that point, though, my favorite Xenomorph has to go to the Queen in Aliens because that reveal of Ripley going back looking for Newt and tracking her and then finding her and then trying to weave their way out, and they run into the room that they had not seen yet from that level in the sub-basement. And they get down there and there's all the eggs and there's all the warriors on the side and there's this massive giant queen laying eggs. And that, of course, is a creation of trash bags and James Cameron. He created a trash bag queen but to show it could work. That's something unlike we'd ever seen. Now every alien film since then has had some different variation of an alien. You know, they had like the dog-like alien in Alien 3, and don't even get me started on the fucking human, whatever the fuck that was in Alien Resurrection, and go on down the line. But every alien film tries to tweak or change or give us a little different version of the Xenomorph. The Queen, to me, outside of the original Alien in Alien, which is, again, the original, the H.R. Giger, design, that Queen was like the game changer because that was huge, massive. It's the egg layer. It's the one creating all these eggs. It's the one thing we didn't know. Where did these eggs come from? It's the Queen. And then of course, the big showdown at the end with the power lifter and everything. It's the most iconic alien, and it's just and it's like literally the opponent for Ripley at the end of Aliens, which I love.
When you are in that egg chamber and it slowly starts revealing where these eggs are coming from, and then it finally cuts to that wide shot, and you just see these massive limbs and this incredibly huge like head plate on this alien, and then from down it slides down, that giant head slides down with these giant teeth made of like grungy glass. It's a thing of beauty. It is the best Xenomorph. I just saved it because I knew you were going to say it. It's the best Xenomorph in the entire series.
Is there any like grosser moment than watching that thing lay an egg and all the slime and just like
so disgusting?
It's so gross. And I think the scariest thing about that is when they see it and it's just silent in the chamber. There's no music, there's no score, and you just hear the alien queen like, and like, oh, it's just fucking, it's so great. And you like that the way it all plays out, because Ripley realizes this is the queen and she threatens it with the fire, and all the aliens back off because this is their queen. It's just like very much like the queen bee in a hive. That's what these things are. They are insects more or less, and yeah, the queen is the best. I mean, that is, credit to James Cameron, man. What a creation.
Oh, it's such an incredible creation. It's one of the greatest creations in all of cinema for creatures.
Yeah, it's awesome. And it's never really been, I mean, honestly, it's never been duplicated again. Like, everyone's tried to do other aliens. Nothing's ever come close to the alien queen. Like, let's be honest. You know what I mean? Like, there's been other cool aliens. The Queen is the Queen.
And you're right too that the original Alien itself, like the Giger design, is one of the greatest creature designs. Period. You know what I mean? It's just like name the iconic creatures. The Xenomorph is going to be on that list and probably somewhere very close to the top.
Yeah, absolutely. It's awesome. Patrick, next category, and we're getting into our final categories. So one thing we brought up, we kind of mentioned, we were thinking about this because what Ash started in the original Alien is introducing these artificial humans, these androids, and there is an android in almost every other Alien film from here on out. From Bishop, of course, in the second one. There is not one in Alien 3, although technically Bishop is in Alien 3.
Yeah.
Just half of him is in Alien 3. Alien Resurrection has one. Of course, Prometheus and Covenant both have them. And, of course, now recently with Alien Romulus. So, Patrick, we are going to rank our androids from 6 to 1. There's 6 total androids.
Just technically 7 if you count Rook from Romulus.
Yeah. Do you want to add 7, or do you want to?
I can throw Rook in there. Let's call this the top 7 artificial humans in the Alien franchise.
All right, so we're gonna go. I'm gonna add Rook here. So I'm gonna name them all for everyone, just so everyone knows the names. Ash from Alien, Bishop, of course, from Aliens and Alien 3, technically. Call, who was Winona Ryder's character in Alien Resurrection. David, of course, was from Prometheus, and that is the great Michael Fassbender. Walter, who is also in Covenant, also played by Michael Fassbender, and of course, David is also in that movie. Andy, who is in Alien Romulus, and Rook, of course, who is also in Alien Romulus. So, Patrick, 7 to 1. How do you rank your androids?
Number 7, the great Winona Ryder as Call. Sorry. She's dead last for me. Just not a great android story. Number 6 goes to Walter in Covenant because he is truly just kind of playing the double of David. Number 5 goes to Rook, who is Ian Holmes' double. A great foil, but ultimately not really the focus of the movie. So, kind of the secondary droid of that movie. Number 4 droid will be Ash. Great villain, not really a great droid because they don't really talk about him for the most part. He's not a droid in that movie. Then it goes Bishop, who I absolutely love, and I think we all love. Great turn of the idea of the droid being villainous. No, the droid can actually be good and altruistic, and that is always going to be Bishop. My number 2 is David. This franchise, the prequels have been controversial. Some people love them, some people hate them, but we can all agree that David is a deliciously evil villain and really is kind of the star of the prequels. But my number 1 droid is Andy from Alien Romulus. My man took the top spot with the brand new movie. I can't get this droid out of my head, Damon. I am dying to know, what are your top 7 droids of the Alien franchise?
That's a little surprising to me, I'll be honest. So I'm going to go 7 to 1, just like you. I'm going to start at number 7, and I'm going to go with Rook as number 7. Not because I thought it was a bad character. I still bump up against bringing back Ian Holm. I understand his family endorsed it, but still, I just think it could have gone another direction. I just didn't feel like he needed to go there. So I put that at the bottom because I didn't see it was necessary. Number 6, I go Call. Winona Ryder, very much a wasted character in Resurrection. Going down to number 5, I will go Walter because, much like you said, just kind of like a double and didn't really serve a great purpose in that movie, and ultimately, wasn't really major part of that. Number 4, I will go with David. I'm not a big Prometheus guy, but I do love Michael Fassbender's performance. He kind of saves those movies, so I put him at number 4. Number 3, I will go with Ash because great villain, great turn, the revelation that he was an android. Number 2, I go Andy. I love Andy. What a sweet, just beautiful character. I love the way it was written. And number 1 for me is none other than let's play the game of stabbing around the hands with our friend Bishop. I love Lance Henriksen, and I think Bishop was just such a great twist to Aliens after what happened in Alien.
Solid picks. I can't disagree with any of those. I think it's cool that both you and I have Andy way high on that list. This is a brand new movie, and this brand new droid, you think we'd need some time. You and I both seen the movie twice. what a fantastic actor, first of all, that he is. And then secondly, for me, my whole rankings, if you're curious how I got through it all, I said, how do these droids fit into the story? Andy's undeniably part of the story of Alien Romulus, and the acting genuinely steals the show. David Johnson, I believe is his name. Fantastic actor who plays this droid on many levels. First, a broken down droid that is clearly having trouble, like just getting around, then becomes an upgraded droid that has these new upgrades and like you can kind of see what he can do. And then thirdly, he's a physical presence and an important part of the plot. Because he is a farming and mining droid, he has incredible strength. You need his strength to get out of these sticky situations. He was integral to saving the people in this one. Now, Bishop is very close to that. It's like because of Bishop was very human in the respect that he would not go beyond his parameters and harm a human for any reason necessary. So he did anything possible to help Ripley get off that planet. So I think David or Bishop and Andy are very similar in that respect. It's just Andy had so much more screen time and so much more story woven in to his character specifically. Because I could have easily put Bishop at number one because I love Bishop. But weaving the story into that character, Andy had a lot more to chew on.
I think the revelation of Ash not only being an android, but him being evil, set the stage for Bishop because, again, as I mentioned earlier, when he gets introduced, Ripley's immediately like, get this thing the fuck away from me. Like, no one told me there would be an android on board. And she distrusts him from that moment on. And we all distrust him at that moment on. Oh, he's just like Ash. And then when they're on that platform and the ship is gone, we're like, oh my God, it happened again. It fucking happened again. This fucking dirty, duplicitous android. And then he comes back and saves them. Of course, sadly, he gets ripped in half by the alien queen. But it's like the redemption story for Bishop. And she's like, because like, that's so sad when she's like, she's like, you did a good job. He's like, I did? And she's like, oh, sweet. And then he gets ripped in half. But that you don't get to Bishop without Ash because Ash has to be the evil fuck that he is to get to Bishop. And I think Andy is like almost like the perfect amalgamation of those two together because he's very sweet, kind, as you mentioned, very broken in the beginning. And then when he gets the upgrades, he's not caring so much anymore. He's more about like the corporate, like we got to figure out this, we got to save the corporate, we got to save this for the corporation. This is all for Weyland-Yutani. The humans are kind of secondary to him at that point. You're like, oh shit, it's kind of like Ash Jr. going on here. And then, she gets the chip out of him and he kind of reboots to what he is. And he's back to being kind of like the sweet David, but still has the upgrades as far as like his modem has kind of been fixed. His computer has kind of been repaired. And he's like the perfect amalgamation of Ash and Bishop. He's sweet at the beginning, kind of evil, and then sweet again to the end. So that's why I said like Andy ended up being my, in a lot of ways he's my favorite because he's the perfect amalgamation of Bishop and Ash. But Bishop was just in that moment. Even when I saw Aliens and I hadn't seen Alien, I understood the dynamic of Ripley didn't like androids. She didn't trust androids. So I didn't trust androids because I trust Ripley. And so the entire movie you spend not trusting Bishop until the very, very end, and he redeems himself and then gets ripped in half. But it's just, I think that to me was like why Bishop was one for me and Andy was two. It's like they're just, I like most of the aliens. I know Call was not evil, but Call was such a waste.
I think it was a waste of a story, and that's the whole point of my rankings were like where do these droids fit in the story, and that's why David ended up being my number two. Because truth be told, David is the reason Prometheus and Covenant are around. Like he is the story in those movies. His story's very strong. That's just like literally they build the entire world of those prequels around David. So that's why he just bumped above my Bishop ranking because of the way he weaves into those stories.
Yeah, and I agree. And again, technically based on this franchise, you don't even have a Xenomorph without David. So
yeah, you kind of owe the franchise to David.
You kind of owe number one to David because technically you don't get here without David. Even though I still don't like to even think about that. Technically, you don't get here without David. So he is pretty important. But yeah, I love that because there's so much baked in distrust after Ash, and then some people like David end up being evil, twisted, just cold calculating androids, and then you get the characters like Andy and Bishop, which are sweet and actually like trying to help humanity because they literally are built to help humanity. So it's a great, it's weird, like the characters that are supposed to be emotionless ended up being some of the characters you like or dislike the most in all these movies.
Oh my God, talk about emotions. I mean, Andy breaks your heart. He absolutely breaks your heart as a character. And he's supposed to be this like unflinching robot. No, he's not. He's actually I think it's another one of these important threads and themes throughout the entire franchise, which is like, don't treat people differently because they're not like you, which is very much thematically relevant for all the droids throughout this entire franchise.
Absolutely. And Patrick, it is time for our final category, ranking the Alien movies from 9 to 1. Now, again, as I mentioned, we didn't review Alien versus Predator or Alien versus Predator Requiem because we personally did not really like to include that in the canon because it really doesn't happen in the canon, truth be told. But yeah. Betty Alvarez said it's part of it, so we're going to include it. We never reviewed them, but we're going to include it. 9 to 1, and then we'll have a little discussion afterwards. So, Patrick, I defer to you, my friend. You are the Alien man. Rank them 9 to 1. What is number 9 going down to number 1?
Number 9 is AVP Requiem, just sort of a soulless cash grab action mashup. Number 8, Alien versus Predator. I actually kind of had fun watching that one in the movies, but again, kind of an empty one. Another Return of the Queen alien, by the way. So, that's why it jumps above Requiem. Coming in at number 7, Alien Resurrection. Damon and I did an entire podcast of why this thing is ranked so very low. Just doesn't feel like an alien movie, despite the fact that Ripley's in it. Coming in at number 6, Alien Covenant. Okay, a movie that we have learned to love and learn to appreciate on a different level. I think it's got more horror in it than the prequels did initially think we had. This movie has blood and guts and gore and some of the more incredible kills in the prequels, and I loved it for that. And it also was a great story arc for David. Coming in at number, what is this, 5 or 6? Where am I at?
You're at number 4. Number 4, I believe, right?
Am I at number 4? It can't be at number 4. I'm at number 5. We'll have to edit this out too.
Oh yeah, sorry. Number 5, sorry.
Coming in at number 5, Prometheus. Yes, Damon, Prometheus, a movie that I learned I didn't like as much as I thought I did, but I can tell you this right now, it has a very high rewatchability rate. I had to watch it again with my kids because they wanted to watch it. Turns out what I realized what works about Prometheus is it has much stronger characters than Covenant does. Covenant has David. Prometheus has Shaw and David, and it has Idris Elba, and it has Charlize Theron. Yes, everything's weirder, stupider in this movie, and there's less xenomorphs in this movie, but the characters make it an entertaining watch. Coming up next at number 4, Alien 3. Damon, I went to the movies to see this just like you did. Alien 3, awesome chase movie, interesting ideas, pretty rough looking alien, from the optical effects and all that good stuff, and not the greatest story of the bunch, but Ripley's still there, and I do indeed love it. Coming in at number 3, Alien Romulus, a top 3er for me. Feels like the original, feels like Aliens, but something entirely its own, and it keeps that great theme of class warfare that bookends that movie. Characters that I love, blood, guts, gore, and action. Alien Romulus is my number 3 Alien film. Coming in at number 2, one of the greatest action films of all time, Aliens, Queen Alien, greatest xenomorph of all time. Hicks, Newt, Hudson, tons of great characters. Tons of incredible quotes. One of the most quotable Alien movies, if not the absolute most quotable Alien movie of all time. And coming in at number 1 should be no surprise to you, Damon. My favorite film of all time, Alien. Truly a perfect film. Not a frame out of place. Not a piece of backdrop out of place. It's one of the best made movies that you will ever see. This is my ranking.
There you go. All right, let me go 9-1 on mine real quick, then we'll discuss. At number 9, I have Alien versus Predator Requiem. It's a film that I wish didn't exist. Number 8, here's where the surprises start. Number 8, Prometheus. I hate this movie. I really do not like this movie, and I really do not like the mythology it introduced in this movie, and I really, really just did not enjoy this one at all. Nothing about this resonates with me, and watching it again to review it for the podcast made me like it even less. At number 7, Alien versus Predator. It's not a good movie, but there are some cool action scenes. You mentioned the Queen comes back, Bishop comes back, Lance Henriksen's in that movie. Again, and I like Predator movies, so it's a cash grab. It's a cheap cash grab, but there's still a couple cool fight scenes in there, so I'll put that at number 7. At number 6, Alien Resurrection, a truly bad Alien film, but it got a little bump up only because Sigourney Weaver is in that movie, and while it's not her best work, at least she's there, and so I'll give her credit for that. At number 5, Alien Covenant, a film that I really didn't like when I first saw it, but rewatching it for the podcast, I was pleasantly surprised that about halfway through that movie, it became a proper Alien film, and I was like, I don't remember this being as good as it was, so Alien Covenant, well done for a second or third watch when I finally revisited it recently. At number 4, Alien 3. I think Alien 3 is a pretty great movie. I still don't like what they did to Hicks and Newt. That's my biggest criticism of that movie. But when you get to Charles Dutton, you get to Charles Dance, you get to the rest of the characters in the prison, it's a pretty well done movie, and it's just the earliest vision of what David Fincher would eventually become as a director, even though he hates it. At number 3, I've got Alien Romulus. Alien Romulus felt, as I said earlier about the Andy character, the perfect amalgamation of Alien and Aliens. It was scary, it was action, it was a good story, it was well acted. Bump up against a little bit against the whole Ian Holm thing, and I bump up against one thing in the ending, which if you go back and listen to our episode, you'll know why. But otherwise, I really love that film, and it's an incredible version of an Alien film, and kudos to Fede Alvarez. At number 2, for me, is Alien. I love Alien. I think it is, as you said, it is a perfect movie. It is a perfect science fiction horror film. But at number 1, I, of course, have Aliens. Is there a little nostalgia factor here because it was the first film I saw? Sure. Is it just because I love great one-liners and I love the action? Absolutely. But I think what sells Aliens for me, it's not even the fact that there's a million xenomorphs, and it's not even the fact that it's an action movie, probably more so than it is a horror movie. It's more science fiction action than science fiction horror. What I love about Aliens beyond any other film in this franchise is I adore these characters, from Ripley to Hicks to Hudson to Vasquez, all down the line. I love the characters in Aliens, and that is to why I think Aliens still, for me, stands head and shoulders above every other film in the franchise. For me, number 1 is Aliens.
I love these rankings for us, Damon, and I think it's crazy that the two of us both put Romulus in the top 3. And we are old. Like, let's be kind to ourselves and just be honest. We're old. And I think I think we skew older in our listenership as well. We have been with this franchise for a really long time. Now, we've mentioned Star Wars a few times and how absolutely toxic their fandom is. You know, the people who have been with Aliens since 1977, their opinions are what I would gently call strong. Okay, we have strong opinions about this franchise because we literally grew up with it. It's really tied into our DNA. Both you and I live and breathe Alien for the most part. And for the brand new movie to make our top 3 really has to tell you something about the quality, the craftsmanship, and yes, some people are going to go, what are you talking about? The storytelling in Alien Romulus is right on par with those first 2 movies. Maybe you're not into those first 2 movies. Maybe you're a prequel head. Maybe your thing is the prequels. The biggest problem I have with the prequels is the stories. Nothing else really. You have more problems with like the fact that there's proto xenomorphs and non-xenomorphs and stuff like that. Like, I'm really just upset that those stories were not very strong. The story in Alien Romulus is incredibly strong. It's such a testament to what this film is that it could be in yours and mine top 3. That's insane to me. I was like, I have a feeling Romulus is not going to be in Damon's top 3, and it ended up being in your top 3 because you've said it many times. You're the story guy, right? Alien Romulus has a solid story. If you guys can't see it, check again, because it's there. Trust me. I was not glamored by all the glitz and the flash and the incredible production design, the top quality CG and practical effects all melded together. Those things were great, and I love those too. Alien Romulus is in my top three because it's a story that works in this franchise perfectly while still being very much its own thing. It did not rely on Ripley at all.
What I also love about Alien Romulus, and I think this is what sets it apart from even Alien 3, which again, outside of the way that they dealt with Hicks and Newt, which I will always bump up against, Alien 3 is a really well done movie. I really enjoyed that movie. The one story point is the one I have a problem with. But again, even I said during our review, I can look past it. I don't like it, but I can look past it. With Alien Romulus, I think where it shares a lot of DNA with Aliens and Alien is that it's well acted and there's actually characters I care about. Kaylee Spaney, I'd watched Kaylee Spaney in other things before this, Mayor of Easttown, some other things she's done. But watching her in Alien Romulus, I was like, well, I want to see everything she does now. And David Johnson, I'm like, dude, whatever he does, I'm just going to tune in and watch because you sold me. Right. Playing Andy was like, all right, just send me his IMDb page and I'll pay for the next movie because I'm going to watch it. That's how good it was. And again, I was already sold on Fede Alvarez from Don't Breathe and Evil Dead and other things he's done. So yeah, Alien Romulus was just like just a really great achievement in both storytelling and execution. And also I loved the ingenuity in that movie, the little details like using gravity to avoid the acid of the aliens. That to me was like one of the coolest little plot twists in that movie because really that works. It was a great little way to get around that. I was like, oh wow, that's a really cool idea. Never would have even thought of that. And I love the ingenuity of that. And also to the top two, Alien and Aliens to me are interchangeable. And like I put Aliens at number one, and I admit I think part of it is nostalgia because it was the first film I saw ever, and part two of that, as I mentioned, I think the characters are, in my opinion, a little stronger, a little bit more like I cared a little bit more about them when they died. Not to say the characters in Alien were bad, I just had a closer connection because they had a little bit more personality. The Marines did, you know. But again, when Alien is on, I don't turn the channel. I don't care what it's on. I watch it. It's incredible. I love that movie. And it's definitely more of the horror film. Now, just to go back into my list, I put Prometheus pretty low. I put it number 8.
Pretty low.
It is pretty low. Part of the reason I did that was what you said, it's story. And I'm the story guy. The story is just not good. And the mythology is just all over the place, going from the engineers to creating humans it was just a really messy movie. But I think what really made me angry about Prometheus when I look back on it, I'm not saying this doesn't happen in other Alien films, but there's a clip on TikTok and on Instagram where we just rail on this. The characters make the dumbest decisions in possibly all the Alien movies, in this one movie. It's like they just took every dumb decision and stuffed it into Prometheus. And that bugs me because while we've conditioned ourselves to characters making kind of dumb, boneheaded decisions in horror movies, like, you know, let's go hang out in the woods where there's a masked murderer. You just kind of roll your eyes and say, well, this must be a Friday the 13th movie or, you know, whatever. But these characters are supposed to be smart. Like, they're scientists, and they make the dumbest decisions. Let's stick my face in front of a fucking space snake and see what happens. It'll never not be dumb. So that's why I put Prometheus lower, just because the story isn't great, but the characters were just mind-numbingly stupid. And that just bugged me because they're supposed to be the smartest people in the universe. They had a ship filled with biologists and geologists and chemists. And I'm not saying all scientists have common sense, but common sense would tell you not to stick your face in fucking front of a snake. So just things like that all over. So yeah, so that's why I ranked Prometheus so low, because it's like the combination of things that I dislike about movies like that. Bad characters, bad story. It just did not resonate with me. And so at least Alien versus Predator had xenomorphs. It had a cool queen alien and it had some cool Predator scenes. So, you know, give me that. Okay. It's not great. I'm not saying it's a good movie, but at least there's that. And like Alien Resurrection, at least there's Sigourney Weaver.
That's fair enough. I think my bottom half of the list was about rewatchability, because ultimately I was like, I don't think any of these are good movies. I just think that, like, now I just have to look at them as like, which one would I be most willing to sit down and sit all the way through? Well, Requiem's like dead last, because why would I want to do that? AVP is pretty close to it because I haven't revisited Alien versus Predator since maybe the first time I saw it on cable almost 20 years ago. Resurrection, I don't ever want to see that movie again. Maybe it should be dead last on this list, if I'm being honest with you. But I could probably sit through it because it's got Sigourney Weaver in it and it's really well made, like it is. Covenant, there's stuff I really like about it, but you need about an hour before you get to that stuff. That's not really rewatchability. And weirdly, Prometheus, it just has interesting characters. Like, they're dumb. They make stupid Friday the 13th level dumb choices, but the characters are interesting thanks in part to a great cast. I think it's just a really good cast, and they all have like some weird, magnetism to them. So that to me was about it really was about the rewatchability of Prometheus, because I would sit down and watch that versus everything below it.
Yeah, when you get to when I get to my top five, again, I go from Covenant to Alien 3, Alien Romulus, Alien and Aliens. Like, I would rewatch all those. Again, even Alien Covenant, which I remember very vividly not liking, didn't do it for me. Revisiting it, I was like, you know what? This isn't bad. Like, yes, you have to get through about 45 minutes of more dumb decisions, really dumb decisions. But once you get through that, you get to a pretty cool movie. And there's some pretty cool action scenes. You get to an actual xenomorph, and it's like, okay. So Covenant was saved by the last hour, 15 minutes of that movie. It turned itself around. It started bad, turned it around. And outside of that, like I said, Alien 3, I just have more of an issue with the opening. But once you get past that opening, the rest of the movie is pretty incredible. It's a great movie. I still, to this day, I understand why David Fincher doesn't like it, because the ordeal of making it, that's what really soured him to the whole experience. But for me personally, I'm like, I really like this movie. And then once you get to the top three, actually again, top four, really, I revisited Alien 3 plenty of times. I will revisit Romulus plenty of times. I've seen Aliens and Alien like 200 times each. So
yeah,
that's it. So, but again, it's kind of a steep drop off when you get past 5 for both of us. I think like you have Prometheus on that list, I don't. But like in that top 5, once you get to like 6 through 9, it gets pretty rough. And like that's like, again, I'm a Nightmare on Elm Street guy. We did that review. Like, if I never see Freddy's Dead: The Final Nightmare again, it would be too soon. That's how I feel about Resurrection. Like, I love Sigourney Weaver, and I ended up putting that like 6, I think, or whatever. But I'm like, that's not a film I ever plan on going back and watching again. So, it's like, it's on the list, and it's technically number 6, but yeah, it's and with Alien and Aliens, I don't have kids. You have kids. I have dogs. It would be like me trying to pick my favorite dog. I would never do that. You would never pick your favorite kid. That's like, technically I have Aliens above, but
Oh man, the top 2 are some of my favorite films of all time. I mean, come on.
On a given day, I will easily pick Alien to watch over Aliens, and then another day I'll pick Aliens to watch over Alien. That's just, there's nothing, you can't go wrong with those two.
You really can't. And this is a franchise that apparently no one can go wrong with, because everyone has opinions on this. Everyone has movies they love in this franchise. It's been a real pleasure, and it's kind of sad that it's coming to an end for us this year. We'll have to wait till next year when we talk about Noah Hawley's Alien Earth, but it was really fun, like, exploring this franchise throughout this year and realizing just how damn good it really is. I mean, its worst movie, I would still rather watch over Freddy's Dead like any day of the week. Its worst movie, I would definitely watch over something like that.
I would still rather watch Freddy's Dead than Prometheus, but that's just me personally. Because at least Freddy's Dead is just so goofy, it's dumb. But yeah.
Bless your heart, Damon. You're stronger than I.
No one in Freddy's Dead sticks their face in front of a space snake and says, "What's going on, little guy?" So yeah, that's But yeah, again, and I think what I learned about the Alien franchise as a whole is that overall, like while I did grow up with the series, because I saw Aliens as a kid, like a little kid, in the late 80s, early 90s. I really did grow up with these movies. Like, I saw from Alien 3 on, I saw everyone in the theater. And I didn't have that experience with Nightmare on Elm Street. Like, Nightmare on Elm Street's my favorite horror franchise. I saw a couple of those in the movies because they were out when I was younger. I couldn't go to see them. Scream, I've seen all those, of course. That's a little later, more recent. But I really grew up with Alien. And so, yeah, like, this is a franchise that I don't love everything, but if you want me to put it, in my pantheon of great franchises, it's up there. I mean, I've said, Nightmare on Elm Street and Scream are my 2 favorites, but I would probably say Aliens is third for me. Like in terms of like the films that I love the most, I like it more than Halloween. I like it more than Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I like it more than Friday the 13th for me personally, you know? So yeah, I came out of this remembering how much I really loved the Alien franchise.
It's a hell of a franchise, man. It's been an honor.
Well, we will have a new franchise in 2025. And I don't know what that's going to be yet. We've talked about it. We've discussed it briefly. We haven't fully decided. We will. And, of course, we've only reviewed 2 TV shows on this podcast before. We did Stranger Things and we did True Detective. We will do Alien Earth when that comes out in 2025.
Oh, yeah.
We will definitely
That's for sure.
That. So we will be revisiting it. And we may have to do a new ranking. We may have to do 1 through 10 and just put Alien Earth in there as its own thing. So you never know. Folks, that is our episode. Of course, we appreciate everyone that stuck around with us for this entire year of Alien. We bounced around a lot. We had to take off time to do other movies, and this started early on, and now here we are in September. We are just now wrapping up with Alien, the Alien franchise. We want to say thank you to everyone that tuned into this entire franchise review. We appreciate it. We'll be back to our regular programming next week. We're doing Speak No Evil. The remake is coming out, so we'll be doing that in a matter of days, so stay tuned for that. As always, you can check us out on all your favorite podcast platforms, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and, of course, over on our website, rewindofthelivingdead.com. And, of course, check us out on YouTube. Just search Rewind of the Living Dead. Please subscribe and like us on YouTube. It does help us a lot. Even if you don't use YouTube to watch the episodes, it just helps us and our numbers if you subscribe. So please do that. Also, follow us on social media. Just search Rewind of the Living Dead. We are on Twitter/X, Facebook, and Instagram. And feel free to send us messages. We love hearing from you guys. Send us your rankings. I'd love to hear more of our fans' rankings. Like, where do you rank Alien 1 through 9? How do you rank these films? Are we wildly wrong to have Aliens and Alien kind of in its own category and then like 7 other films? Let us know. We'd like to know your rankings. So please send us that on social media, as I said, on Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram. Or you can send us an email at rotlivingdead@gmail.com. That's rotlivingdead@gmail.com. And you can also find us on our own personal social media channels. I am at Damon Martin, and you are?
At Director Patrick.
And a big thank you, as always, for everyone that tunes in the show. We will be back next week with another edition of Rewind of the Living Dead. Thanks for tuning in, and we will see you then.
Game over, man. It's game over.